والله يدعو إلى دار السلام ويهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, and welcome to this episode of Beauties of Islam. I'm Yusuf Estes, and for the next few minutes I'd like to talk to you about one of the biggest of the beauties of Islam that has struck me as being probably the best of answers to the human being. When people come to this point or conjunction in their life and they say, why are we here? How did we get here? What's it all about? And what is the purpose of my life? And that's what we want to talk about on this episode of the Beauties of Islam. What is the purpose behind everything? First and foremost is to establish that there is a God. Now we have done a number of programs about that to prove, even scientifically, beyond any shadow of a doubt, Allah exists. There have been scientists who have also come to this same conclusion. But then there are always going to be those who will say that, yes, but according to my logic, I don't understand. I don't see how you can believe in a God. According to my logic. In our other programs, we've discussed this too. But human logic only goes so far. According to the human logic, just 500 years ago, most of Europe was convinced the earth was flat. They didn't know that the Quran had already said it was round 1400 years ago. But what about 2,000 years ago? What did the people think about the earth? Human logic, you look straight out and the earth looks flat. You don't really see the curve, do you? No, you don't. So how far can you go with human logic? And stop and think about this. According to our logic, if we had to use just this and not know some of the scientific discoveries, there are a lot of things that, well, just wouldn't work. I remember, okay, for instance, when I was going to school many years ago, they told us according to the aerodynamics of the bee. Now we're talking about a honeybee, you know, zzz, little bee, right? Nahl, they call him in Arabic. And this little guy, he's kind of fat, kind of big, and he has tiny wings on him. And they said, according to their logic, according to the aerodynamics that they understood of flight, the bee can't fly. I said, the bee can't fly. I was a little boy. I was thinking, the bee can't fly according to your books, according to your teaching, according to your aerodynamic design. A bee can't fly. I said, it's a good thing the bee can't read, because if he read the book and found out he couldn't fly, he'd have to walk to all of the flowers. Human logic? Human logic is nothing more than a reflection of the current mode of thought of the day. People at the time of Plato and Socrates and the great thinkers of old also thought that they knew everything there was to know about everything. But if you want to insist on human logic, I will allow that in our conversation simply because it's logical. And at the same time, I'm going to ask you a question. Who was it, in fact, in the very beginning that came out with this concept of logic anyway? Human logic, the brain, the way we rationalize things, the way we understand things came about from who? The very people I just mentioned. Socrates, Plato, those thinkers. And guess what? You want to accept that? Do you accept it? Yes, yeah, they came out, they were the great thinkers, they were the great theologians. Good! Did you know that each and every one of them came to the conclusion there is God? So you want to talk about that? Well, they said it. The people that you're thinking are so great, so brainy, so brilliant, according to their rules of testable evidence, God exists. Now what are you going to say now? So it wouldn't be logical now for you to deny that, would it? If you're going to say I use logic, well, logic says God exists. Now what are you going to say? I recall that there was an incident of a professor who insisted to his students, there's no God. He kept saying, there's no God, there's no God. And when they said, why? Because most of them, they believed. Some were Jewish, some were Christian, some were Muslims. He said, if I don't see it, if I don't hear it, if I can't feel it, if I can't taste it, if I can't smell it, it doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, I don't believe in it. It's as simple as that. One of the students tried to argue with him about it. He was saying, well, God is something beyond that. You have to have faith. You have to believe. And he said, why? Why should I believe? How? The boy said, well, I don't know, but we just have to believe. He said, sit down. Another boy stood up and he said, listen, as Muslims, you know, we believe, but we have proof at the same time. He said, proof? What proof do you have? He said, by knowing what God has done and what he's doing, we know he exists. He said, what? What are you talking about? He said, sir, can you see electricity? Well, no, but it still exists. Ah, true. Sir, he said, are you able to hear everything? He said, yes. He said, wait a minute. Aren't there sounds that some animals hear that we can't hear? Well, yes. Okay. Now there's two things. One you can't see, one you can't hear, but you still believe in it, don't you? Well, yeah, but I have evidence. I have scientific evidence. Okay. Now I ask you another thing. Sir, is there such a thing as heat? He said, of course. Everybody knows there's heat. And we measure it as BTUs, British Thermal Units. He said, sir, is there such a thing as cold? He said, yes, there's such a thing as cold. He said, sir, there's not such a thing as cold. There is no cold. What? What are you talking about? I'm sure you'd like to know the answer to that too. So when we come back from the break, let's find out what the student meant when he said there's no such thing as cold, and then find out how that relates to the rationale of the human and how we can prove there's God. Right here on Beauties of Islam. Sit tight. We'll be right back.
Islam is keeping up the pace.